From the break, I think we have to move on with the program. I am going to invite to the podium Dr. Mbali Mazibuko, and she's going to help us have a conversation around women's leadership, safety, and justice in mining communities. She's going to be having a conversation with a few other, thinkers, leaders, and she's going to introduce them and invite them to the podium. Dr. Mbali, over to you. A round of applause, please. Thank you.
Aso se waphela mandla, aso se waphela leli lizwe ngelamakhosikazi. Aso se waphela mandla, aso se we are fetching those people outside. Lizwe ngelamakhosikazi. Asoze waphela mandla, asoze waphela leli lizwe ngelamakhosikazi. Mlilizela. Asoze waphela mandla, asoze waphela leli lizwe ngelamakhosikazi. Asoze waphela mandla, asoze waphela mandla. Long live Bafazi, long live. Long live Bafazi, long live. Viva Mbogoto, viva! Amandla, awethu, amandla, awethu. Sanbonani, hello. Good afternoon, good morning. Oh goodness, good morning. Dumelang, Lochani, hey, Molweni. Okay. I'm happy that we are all here and we're alive. Welcome to the first panel of the morning. I think our wonderful MC has already briefly introduced me. My name is Dr. Mbali Mazibuko in the Department of Anthropology and Development Studies at the University of Johannesburg. So we welcome all of our guests and our lovely MEC, who I think is still taking photos with us. We have 3 panelists for the first panel this morning, and I would just like to invite each of them up to sit here with me. We have Prof. Janice Moodley, we have Ontlotlile Simela, and we have Mamosa Modise. So can I please invite you to join me on stage before we kickstart our panel? And can you please give them a round of applause? Right, it is an honor to welcome you all to this important gathering that celebrates and elevates the role of women in mining and agriculture, 2 of South Africa's most vital and traditionally male-dominated sectors. Today, we stand in the presence of academics, pioneers, activists, who are breaking ground both literally and figuratively. From the rich soils of our farmlands to the depths of our mineral wealth, women are not only participating, they are leading, innovating, and transforming. Despite historical barriers, South African women continue to prove that inclusion is not just a moral imperative. It's a strategic advantage. In agriculture, women are the backbone of food security and rural development. In mining, they are reshaping leadership, health, and safety and sustainability. This is more than a celebration. It is a call to action to invest, support, and amplify the voices of women who are cultivating the future and unearthing possibilities. Panel 1 on women's leadership, safety, and injustice in mining communities comprises of Prof. Janice Moodley from the College of Human Sciences, the School of Social Sciences, and in the Department of Psychology at the University of South Africa. Then we have Ontlotlile Simela, African Regional Chair, International Association for Political Sciences. And lastly, we have Ms. Mamosa Modise, who is the founder and president of the Association of Women in Mining South Africa. So I believe that all of our panelists have been given kind of guiding provocations, which is really what we're going to kickstart this conversation with. And first up, I think the tech team is just going to help us to share the full and comprehensive bio of our first speaker that you can see on the screen, Prof. Janice Moodley, who's joining us from the University of South Africa. And Prof. Janice Moodley was asked the provocation in relation to this theme: how do psychological stresses related to workplace safety, gender-based discrimination, and leadership exclusion impact the mental health and resilience of women working in mining communities? So Prof. Janice Moodley, I understand that we are a little bit short for time, but I'm going to give you about 7 to 8 minutes, and I will time you. But I think we can hand over the floor to you, and may I please request that for the last time we give Prof. Moodley a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for those warm words, Madam Chair. As I was reflecting on what I was tasked to speak about today, I actually think that as a social scientist, it would be easier if you asked me to build a rocket to take all of us to the moon than answer these types of questions. Because when I look at just the keywords that were given to me, workplace safety, gender-based discrimination and what follows from that, which is gender-based violence, leadership exclusion, and relating all this to mental health and resilience within a very, very difficult industry. And when you also understand that each of these keywords are so ideological in itself, when we understand that, as the MEC has said already, is embedded within legacies of colonialism and apartheid, that is still thriving over 30 years after democracy. Sometimes it may seem futile, but we are making progress, and it's spaces like this that give us the opportunity to dialogue. Because one of the strategies of the oppressor, one of the strategies of hiding women's needs within these spaces is to silence, is to mask, is to make our needs invisible within these spaces. But I think it's such a privilege to be here to just talk about these important dialogues that we should be having. But first of all, before I get into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to say that when we talk about women, one of the mistakes that we also make as women is by collectively bunching all of us into one space or one kind of category without acknowledging that each of us in this room has different needs. And when we look at women in mining, they are no different to us. They are not a homogeneous group, because you get women that are in executive or corporate positions. You get your professionals, such as your geologists and your mineralogists, and then you get women that work in the labor force. And none of them have the same needs. Yet when we speak about them, we speak blanketly about them. And when we speak blanketly about them, that is when the needs of individual women are not met. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge within the mining industry, there's so many different sectors that women engage in, whether it's the informal or formal mining industry, whether it is corporate or the labor force, or whether it is also looking at artisanal or small to medium versus large corporate enterprises within the mining communities. But all of these women face diverse challenges, and I want to speak to the challenges that women on the ground level may experience in terms of going underground, experiencing issues of excessive heat, poor ventilation, dim lighting, etc. And these conflate with other issues that they may experience within the job sector, such as sexual discrimination and harassment. So when we look at women, we have to look at the varied intersectionalities that create or compound vulnerabilities that affect women. And when we look at women in mining, especially on the ground level, we see that these intersectionalities, such as race, socioeconomic status, educational status, makes women more vulnerable. When you look at the mining industry, it is extremely hazardous by nature. And when you take the hazards that women experience on a daily basis, and you conflate that with the gender-based violence that they may be experiencing at home, and you conflate that with the fact that they are maybe not being harassed at work, but there's no upward mobility, and you look at all these intersections of oppression, is it difficult to, understand that we are sitting with mental health issues that are not being addressed? And even when it comes to mental health issues, we think of mental health as stigmatized. We think about it as something that we don't talk about in public spaces. But your mental health and your well-being, your mental health well-being, impacts the different hats that you wear as an employee, as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter of the community. You will not be able to interact within those spaces unless you are well psychologically. And when we look at, in addition to environmental stresses, there's also other stresses within the organization, such as gender wage gaps. These things are not spoken about, it's hidden. If you want to talk about the lack of women in leadership positions, and even when women are placed into leadership positions, are they actually given autonomy to do what is needed? And then we look at other issues within the mining sector, such as job insecurity. And this obviously depends on the type of level that you are doing within the mining sector. Also issues of shift work, because all of these issues affect your work-life balance, affect your well-being. And this can lead to low job satisfaction. And what happens when we are not satisfied at work? It manifests in ways such as absenteeism, where we just aren't able to go to work. And I'm not saying it in a way that we are being delinquent, but we are sick. We may be sick physically, and we stay away from work. What about presenteeism? When we're actually at work, when we are sick, when we shouldn't be at work, but we are forced to be in those spaces because of the fear of the consequences and the repercussions if we are not at work. And this can also lead to issues of interpersonal conflict with other peer workers. And when we are distracted, this can also lead to risk of injury at work. So all of these issues are interconnected. And when we talk about mental well-being, we're talking about the structural inequalities that hold us back. And this leads to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, Because can you imagine being in a constant flight or flight mode, always fear, always anxious, not understanding any stability within the workforce because you don't belong, you're isolated, you are excluded. And these issues, we talk about, let's have resilience. And we are women, we are resilient by our very nature. But we need to dismantle those structures that necessitate us being survivors, to us coming to a place where we are thrivers within the industries that we are occupying. And I just want to end off by saying we talk about gender equality. And when we talk about gender equality, it means that each of us are given the same resources and are said, go and thrive. But as the MEC said, we are given the land, but are we given the seed? And when we talk about gender equity, what we are saying is that I will meet you at the point of your need. I will develop policies that will enable you in your particular phase in life, in your particular job description, in your particular context, that will allow you to thrive. And gender equity is not a new term. But I think as policymakers, as influencers, as advocates, we need to become more sensitive in empowering women in an equitable way that acknowledges we may have the same experiences, but those experiences are influenced by the multiple hats and identities that we hold. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. And just to everybody, we will have a round of questions at the end. So you can just hang on to any questions or provocations you have. But thank you so much, Prof. Moodley. And for reminding us also of the importance of really being able to understand women in their diverse roles. Because even when we're thinking about mining, it's easy to think about someone who's just and solely underground. Okay, and maybe not women that are also connected to the space in some way. We also understand that the mining space intersects so heavily, even in our history, and this is something we spoke about at the last engagement on women's economic empowerment. We know that the industry of even sex work in the mining space is something that is quite pervasive and left as something that is not being thought about or not being included in the agenda. It means there are certain women that continue to be even written out as we are having these conversations. And secondly, also, thank you for also pointing out, Prof, the importance of thinking about a kind of participatory action research that really allows for us to move beyond these conversations by fully immersing ourselves in the kinds of experiences that those women that are underground are experiencing. So if we think about the work of scholars like Asanda Benya at UCT and the several months that she spent doing her PhD actually going underground, right, and having these conversations, trying to illuminate to us the complexities that these women face when they are working in the mine. So thank you so much for that. I would like to then offer our following speaker an opportunity to respond to their prompt, and that would be Ontlotlile. Ontlotlile, same rules apply. I will definitely count you down, and my apologies for that. But Ontlotlile's provocation or guiding question for their response today was, what are the structural and cultural barriers hindering women's access to leadership roles in mining communities? And how can inclusive leadership models promote gender equity in the sector? I think you can, take the floor. Thank you. So Ontlotlile says she's used to teaching. Absolutely, please put us in your lecture hall.
Sorry about that. Okay, thanks. Okay, so with that question, I'm going to ask it in a very holistic manner. And so first of all, when we think about these questions, historically, what role have women played in the agriculture and mining space? So it's very important for us to understand these things, because if we close our eyes all of us, and we think about how we grew up, we can always think about our grandmothers tilling the soil. Oh, am I not audible? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Please put that in. So we can think about our grandmothers tilling the soil. In our communities, you can think of the ladies singing, humming, and buzzing around with the kids at the back of their back, just sitting there as a communal space and engaging with each other and engaging with the soil and the land, as we've always been doing for generations and centuries. And it's very important for us to understand that we've always had a relationship with the soil, with the stone, with the earth, and that is something that has been disrupted. And when we think about these things, it's very important for us to go back to where we come from, because this is nothing new. It has been disrupted. And it was disrupted. It would be remiss of us not to mention the pesky thing called colonization, which I will not get into because that's my field of study. So when we think about that, when the pesky thing happened, is that it came along with many things. It came along with capitalism. It came along with also patriarchy, because in the society that we had built for centuries, we had a way that we lived together in harmony. You know, not total, but it was some sort. And when that happened, you also have, we have the empires that came before us, the empires of Kush, Mali, Andaman, Musa, Mapungu, and the Great Zimbabwe that came in, and the beautiful sculptures of the Nok tribe that has been displayed all over Africa, all over Europe, sorry about that, and some Americas. They still won't bring it home, but it's fine. And then when we look at that, we also have had women who are also land management and land resources, and we have the Dahomey tribe, and also we have Queen Amina of the Zaza. So it's very important for us to understand that we have not just been reduced to the 60% of women in agriculture who actually are the ones who are on the fields. So we have been people who actually have been in these boardrooms even for centuries. So that's very important for us to always reconnect from where we come from. If there's nothing else you hear from my talk, is that we need to go back and have these conversations and understand what actually led to us. Because as we think about that, we have centuries and centuries. When you think about the Mapungubwe kingdom, that was in the 1100s, and many others that happened after that. We need to actually go back and look at our history. How many of us go back and look at where we come from? That is the main question at hand. So even though Africa has had a glorious history, as I've said, because of colonization, we actually have lost that. But we also have the great Haile Selassie, who actually was one of the founding members of the AOAU. He was actually very pro, not just Pan-Africanism through his rhetoric, but also the way he spoke, the way he acted, and through his actions of also fighting for sovereignty, which we need to also do to fight for sovereignty of our resources. But I will not be the person as a social sciences as we do, always posing questions. There are people who have come up with solutions. So we do have women-led mining corporations, as they're doing in Mwanza in Tanzania, and we also have the UN, also it has the Women by Women initiative. We also have the AU's Agenda 2063, which is actually not just going through and looking at the issues that we're having, but also coming up with solutions. And it's very important to also look at what our neighbors have been doing. In Zimbabwe, they are actually encouraging and implementing artisanal mining, which is very important for us to find out. As much as we also, in our very beautiful country with our very beautiful constitution, it also hinders many things, because we can't go back to small-scale farming as we used to do, or as they're doing in other countries. So with that, you have women who can actually go in the backyard and look for gold, and also make sure that they can actually get the money that they need for, as beautiful as they have been going, and we're going also into agriculture, is that they are interlinked and intersect. So it's very important for us to look at them, as this talk is doing, to say that these two, they are very interrelated, as we have talked about the relationship that we have with the soil and the land and the stone, and Mother Earth always blesses us. Because we have disrupted her, that's why we have such issues as, what is this, global warming, some would say. Some would say it does not exist, but that's a conversation for another day, such as the people who own the land. Because as we say, 60% of us, although we are working on it, ownership is a different conversation that we will not get into today, because And we go back to the importance and how they intertwined and interlinked and intermingled, is that we see now companies such as Harmony Gold and Pan-African Resources, is that they have a lot of projects that they are refurbishing old mining, after the LOM, which is life of mine, is that usually the community does displaced because there's nothing left to mine in there. So now what happens is that it becomes a dying town or a ghost town. And what companies have been doing is that they're implementing solutions, such as in turning or refurbishing old mines into agricultural land. And with that is that there's quite a number of money that's been pumped into there, and quite a number of positive reforms that have happened. But as we said, that we're looking at small villages, small towns. So with that, the big things, although trickle-down economics is a very tricky thing, and it's not really feasible for the people at the bottom, as we know that this pesky thing called capitalism, money never, ever flows down to the bottom, right? It starts off with a gushing well, but we get a little droplet somewhere at the bottom. So it's very important for us to focus on the small-scale farmers, as we've been doing. So you look at what's happening in the irrigation project. In my previous life, I was a project and research coordinator across Africa. So you look at all the projects that are happening, and it's quite heartwarming when you see what the UN and other financial institutions have been doing. But you know how it is give and take, and that is also a conversation for another day. And that is why even, guys, although we have 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, yet somehow, due to all these things, we import 50 billion USD of food annually. So let me repeat that. I'm going to repeat that. Africa has 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, but yet somehow, with all these beautiful land and bread baskets, they spring up every 10 years. Zimbabwe is the next bread basket, Sudan is the next bread, oh my goodness. But somehow it never, goes into fruition, yes. So it's very important for us to understand what is going on. And this is the thing that I'm talking about, because we engage in such a high level. So we need to also sit back, because we also do talk on behalf of other people with our beautiful English, but hey, And we look at also what's going on in Kenya. They have the Aheru irrigation scheme. We also have the Nigeria Fadama farming, and there's quite a number of them that's happening. And it's very important for us, because being a giant or being the big elephant in Africa, some would say, is that it comes with the thing of us thinking that we are bigger than we actually are, and not learning from the ants. So here we are fighting amongst ourselves, or trying to have a pissing contest, but yet we don't understand while we are having a pissing contest all the way up here, all the four leaders of the continent, all the regions, your Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, and all the likes, is that we forget that the ants are down there building malls and having very strong irrigation systems and very strong, beautiful cities. If you open up an ant hill, or you would be very shocked as to what you find underneath there, because they've learned to survive. As Black people, we know. We've learned to survive, oh my goodness, through these traumatizing centuries and decades. We've learned to have a smile on our faces, even though we face so many turmoils. So it's very important for us to understand that, and that's why we have to go back to small scale, as I would say. And it goes back to so many things. And what I would say is that although policies are very idealistic to be speaking on, because somehow they never also trickle down to the people who actually need it. And as we say that if a lion has to go in and define what hunting is, it'll never, ever, ever look at the perspective of the deer or see how it will actually be at fault. So it's very important for us when we have this conversation to include the relevant people in the conversation and to see how people are doing it. Like the small-scale farmers that we were talked about earlier, and also what's going on with the kale. It's been cultivated. Our next door neighbor, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and also we have people in the Zambia who knows exactly what kale is. When you drive around Johannesburg, you will see lots of small-scale kale farmers, because that's how you get through famine and that's how you get through tough times. But then because we have lost the relationship and the connection that we have with the soil through also something as simple as building concrete in our houses. Because you know how it is, those pesky trees make your yard dirty instead of feeding your family and going and waiting for 350. So thank you everyone for giving me your time, and have a lovely day.
Thank you so much for that very detailed and I think technical but also poetic presentation. Absolutely. I mean, this is the work of scholars. Hey? Thank you. I really feel like we were transported into what your lecture looks like, which is quite exciting. And thank you for also reminding us. And I know this is a recurring point that comes up in these engagements. The one being the importance of a kind of memory work and intergenerational dialogue, which somehow, just because we think that it's different ages that are gathered here, that it's an intergenerational dialogue. So we actually also need to look at what the terms and conditions of that conversation looks like. And I do think we need to be more intentional about those conversations without any grouping of generations or category of generations feeling like this is not a safe space or one taking dominance of over the other. So thank you for that. And I believe that the many pearls of wisdom that you've given us are going to turn into questions and provocations at the end. Thank you. I would like to then give our last speaker an opportunity to respond to her question, Ms. Mamosa Modise. And the guiding question for her was, to what extent are safety protocols and justice mechanisms in mining communities responsive to the unique risks and vulnerabilities faced by women, particularly in cases of gender-based violence and environmental hazards? Ms. Mamosa, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Program Director, thank you very much. Prof. Ojo, and audience at large, I thank you for this opportunity. So, as a woman in mining and as a woman that was in the core mining underground, so I know all of these challenges that you just spoke about because I was physically there underground, experiencing what we call the gender-based violence. The reporting system is not efficient enough, so I can witness that gender-based violence in the mining space is really still not adhered to. We still have to see the channels, how we can actually minimize and make awarenesses when it comes to gender-based violence in the mines. So we all know that mining in South Africa plays a very critical role when it comes to the economy of this country. It provides jobs, investments, and rural development. They're vital for exports and manufacturing industry like gold, platinum, PGM, manganese, and all of those communities. But when it comes to safety, women and environmental sustainable are still neglected. So I'll give just a short case scenario when I was still in the underground mining, whereby when you talk about the safety protocols and the unique risks and vulnerabilities faced by women, particularly in case of the gender-based violence, I will table it down and tell you guys that as a woman going underground, it's not an easy work to do because the systems that are in play, that have been put in place underground, they are still not conducive for women. There's what you call zamazamas underground, and you've been put there at the start of the conveyor belt, controlling, actually giving the communication between somebody in the control room at the surface, and you are there reporting the ore being transported to surface. let me tell you, when it's actually risky at its own, because once you move out of that conveyor belt, there's no signal. And when you move, just like you go to the bathroom, immediately the Zamazamas can do something about you, because we don't even know how these people get underground. And there's a case scenario that happened at where I was working. The lady was controlling the conveyor belt system, reporting surface, and she shifted from where she was working to go to the bathroom, whereby even the toilets underground, when it comes to safety, it's horrible, because people even get infections. There is no flushable toilets. I've never really heard in South Africa whereby there is a mine that is conventional that has toilets underground. I've never heard of. I've been there. I know how bad it is to share a toilet with men, and it's just horrible. It's not, they can't be flushed, you know. So already that at its own, it's risky, and the safety is just poor. And this lady eventually, the belt stopped. You know, when you transporting or underground, somehow there's big rocks. So when they go through the conveyor and the crusher, the rock will get stuck. So they have to call her to start up the belt. Why is the belt stopping? And because the system on the surface can really see what is happening underground when it comes to the conveyor belt. So this lady took about an hour before they can actually see that maybe something happened. Why is this person there? The next belt attendant went there and tried to check her. She was not there, you know. So up until they realized, no, after 2 hours, there's no this person. Then they started to call the police from the surface to come underground. And up until the next day, we couldn't find that lady. It was horrible. It was even on news. They even actually reported that because of the kind of system that we have underground. So meaning the Zamazamas took her, they found her then after 2 days. And it was trauma for her, because he said, no, people tracked her, they raped her, you see. So it was a very sad scenario. So I would say, when you talk about the mechanism underground, I'm a witness. I know these things. So they do happen, and we need the mines and the government. I was happy that I saw the MEC here, and he's not here. Actually, even for Prof, next time you must actually also involve the mining leaders in the government to actually form part of because when you talk about mining, we also expect to see our leaders in the government space to be part of this, not only agriculture. So the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy must actually form part in a very serious way for this kind of event that you do. So, so I'll actually say policies and awarenesses campaigns are available in the mining space, but the implementation of the mechanism are very slow. Without prosecutions from law enforcement agencies. Recommendations: mandatory personal tracking devices for all workers. This GBV, gender-based violence, is not only in the mining space. Look at Lerato's scenario. So even there has to be a system that each and every, whether university, whether mining, whether government, as a woman, we need to have that tracking system whereby even when you go to the coffee shop, you know there's also gender-based violence there. That's why then we have our organization, Association of Women in Mining in South Africa, has partnered with a company called Hexagon Mining, because they deal with this kind of systems in the mines. But particularly they were doing that for the machineries in the mines. But what about safety of our people, our women, underground, in the mining space? So mines must actually shift from caring or having interest on their own equipment, on how they're going to make money, but the safety of the people that are actually extracting that ore is not being adhered to. So the install emergency communications infrastructure underground, that has to be done. Regular human checks in and safety protocols. Gender-sensitive safety policies and GBV prevention protocols. Also, I'm about to finish. Environmental hazards and health risks, which is rocks fall and poor mine design. Also, we have cases like that, whereby there will be what you call fall of ground. The fall of ground, when that fall of ground happens, you don't know who is, and because mining is like, underground is like a confined space. It's just that there's ventilation for us to actually breathe, but it's very confined. So when there's that fall of ground, you just don't know who's working under that ground. So that determines by poor mine planning, which as we have rock engineers, we have got all these professionals that really, when it comes to underground mining, safety of people must be number one. We must put safety first when it comes to mining, especially for women, because I'm talking on behalf of women here. So the other one is blasting impact nearby communities. Blasting causes cracks in homes, roofs, and walls. Danger for women and families who fear homes may collapse, because once you blast, or nearby communities, the doorstep communities, they also get affected. The houses cracks, and I always say that is responsible for our government and for our man, because it also takes us back to the proper planning of mine was never really done properly. Mine's response with PPE and awareness talks, but not a real repairs or enough compensation. Let me talk about, I'm closing. Okay, let me just talk about climate change and ethical mining. Mining contributes to climate change and environmental harm. Slow adoption of eco-friendly methods. And in summary, what must be done? Prioritize human life over profit. Install real-time safety systems and alert underground. Respond quickly and thoroughly to GBV and health incidents. Provide long-term trauma support, not just temporary, fixed. Enforce climate laws and mining ethics. Empower communities to protect their homes and environment. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mamosa. Yeah, I have a lot. I know. And I think for me, what came to my head was something that bare musadi tswara tipa ko bohaleng, and why? You know, it's actually quite a, I think it's even beyond trauma. It's an undignifying experience to have. And it's disproportionately undignifying, even when we just think about the fact of being African and the fact of being an African woman, right? And then, of course, it gets worse, the fact of being an African queer woman, which are also missing from these conversations. So thank you so much for that. I'm not sure where our program director is. Thank you. Do we have the luxury of a round of questions? 5 minutes. Okay. So I'm opening the floor. I think I'll take 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll wrap it up. There's 1 over there. There's 2, and there's 3. Umama Emuva. Okay. Oh. You guys are going to make me fight with the program director. But we'll start with one there. I think what's going to help is if maybe we try to avoid the comments and get to the question. Okay, thank you.
Greetings to the House at large. So I'm not quite particular. I'm not directing my question to a certain individual, but the whole panel can answer it. How has policy progressed in recognizing the rights and agency of widowed women in land rights and not just land use in rural areas? How then do we position these women as industry leaders? And then lastly, how then do we ensure that we curb the intergenerational transmission of poverty when we strip women of land rights? That's my question.
Okay, that is very loaded. So I think let's maybe take the next two, the Kunu Mama at the back, and there was one person here. And then, of course, I think because those were 3 questions, so the panel is, you have the luxury of choosing which you respond to.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for that informative dialogue. The question that I want to ask, or rather, it's not ask, but it's also looking at the issue of gender-based violence. It has been with us for the longest time. We've got all of these policies, but we're not making a dent. The president, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, actually talked about putting finances to GBV. We've not seen that. What are we all doing about that? That is one. But 2, is government not complacent in this gender-based violence?
Dumelang. I think for me, just adding to the 2 speakers, is around what programs, especially in the mining area, have you put, because I see you are the president of AMIUSA, for women working in mining industry in terms of, especially with their psychosocial wellness or their well-being, to say these are some of the programs that you can also attend to also sort of for safety, especially safety. And I think for Ontlotlile, as you are from the Northwest, and I know in the Northwest there's like lots of mines. What are you also, your role as a university in the mining industry?
Okay, so I think for now, I'm going to allow the panel to respond, but I'm going to abuse my powers as the chair, just ask one question. And that's to, I think, both Prof. Moodley and you, Ms. Modise. What, if at all, what is the infrastructure that is available for mental health? Just curious to know, because we know generally, especially in South Africa, it's a struggle to even access a therapist or anything. Is there some kind of a structure that exists? Do we know? Yeah, so.
Okay, let me answer this one. When it comes to the structure in terms of the mental health, especially from the trauma that normally happened to these people, yes, they are. They are in the mines. They've got what you call the clinics and the social workers that actually look into these people. But what we are facing is, you know, they look into production more than what the health of. The time is not really allocated for this particular person to say, okay, we are going to give this person attention, because the drama, you can't just get over it overnight. It's a process. So it's the things that we are also battling with in terms of the money and the government. And the other thing that I want to emphasize with these questions that I hear, that's why I asked Prof. Ojo to say, the right people that are sitting with, we are non-governmental organization. We are also battling to go through the funds to actually do an awarenesses of this kind of GBV that is happening in our country and even in our mining space. So it's important that in these forums, government and mining decision makers are being invited, so that these kind of questions, we can directly take them to to be able to account, so that they must also account to what is it that they are doing. As an organization, we are seeing this, we are reporting this, but due to the lack of finance, we can't really be visible enough to say this is what we do in terms of minimizing this kind of approach that we get along.
Just speaking about mental health, I think as a country we are in crisis when it comes to resources that are available to mental health. And when you look at the ratio of psychologists to the general population, for every 300,000 people in the country, there's one psychologist. And if you understand it in that context, you understand why we are a nation in conflict, why we are a nation in crisis. And I heard a question about gender-based violence. Gender-based violence, unfortunately, will continue as long as we don't confront the past, as you've said. Because where does gender-based violence comes from? Why are we a nation that has the highest number of murders in the world? Why are we a nation that has the highest number of gender-based violence incidents in the world? It comes from our past. And unless we confront the past, and unless we confront those colonial and apartheid legacies that have resulted in us feeling it's normal to not have family. And when I talk about family, when we talk about land dispossession, part of that land dispossession was making parents leave their children to go and seek employment. What happened during that dispossession? Children were left fatherless and motherless. And we have societies today where the perpetuation of violence within the family continues because of people being plied with alcohol as payment. And when you look at alcoholism, especially within the marginalized communities, we tell them, get your act together. Like, stop this. But we don't actually trace the fact that the genetics have been fundamentally altered to become dependent on the tool of the oppressor. And until we can confront these very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable underlying structural issues that keeps us perpetuated within cycles of violence. I'm so sorry for you, Gogo, at the back. We never going to reduce the rates and even the underreported statistics within this country and within the mining communities. So we can get together, we can talk as much as we want, but unless the patriarchal systems that keep gender-based violence alive in our societies, in our homes, is confronted and dismantled, we'll continue having these conversations. Because how many of you present in the room within the last month have been affected by it? And when we look at women within the workplace, we want positions of leadership. But how many of us talk about us being leaders within our spaces, but still having to go home to gender inequality, to still have to go home to gender-based violence? And unless we have these very uncomfortable conversations, unfortunately, we will continue to be a nation that is leading statistics for the wrong reason. Thank you.
I think just in 2 minutes you can respond to any one of those questions.
There was a question like, you did ask the question about the Northwest University, what is its relationship with the mining sector? Well, with that, I'm in the politics department. So, and I think that they are the geology department and other the engineerings, they have more of a relationship than we would have in the politics department. So that's basically how I would answer your question. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you all so much to our panelists once again. Can we please give them a round of applause? And I think at this time I'm going to hand over to our program director.